Hello and welcome to the first episode of Mastering Dungeons of 2024. I'm Shawn Merwin here with Teos Avadia. Hey Teos, welcome to 2024. It's great to be with you in this new year.
It's fantastic. I'm looking forward to this. We took a week off. We fully recharged. It's a new year, new you, new me.
Mm.
And I'm excited. And we
I
got a new game to talk
I
about. So,
yeah, I gotta find the old me because I forgot a lot of what I knew. So I need to interrogate that
yeah,
SOB.
that's too,
Uh,
too
but it's good to be new. And yes, later in this episode, we will talk about the Blade Runner starter set. Very excited to dive into 2024 looking at a new game as we did a lot last year looking at new games.
Yeah.
But first, we're going to get to our news and our listener corner, starting with that listener
Mm.
corner and a missive from our Patreon Discord uh, from a name apart. A name apart says, what do you think about having attacks and spells always do half damage and then the full damage if they hit and succeed? This seems like it would help with some of our current complaints on lack of monster difficulty and lack of player resource depletion. And it also mitigates some of the swinginess of the D20 hit or miss system and gives a much more positive valence to failures or misses. Uh, I am not opposed to any of that, but I would need to see a system do that before I can assess it in a reasonable way. And I can tell you right now that established D&D players and fans would hate it for D&D because it's so different from what they're used to. Just making players roll an attack roll for magic missile, caused an earthquake somewhere. I think.
But yeah, there has been so much outrage about just this idea of the game not being what it has been before, right?
So just sticking with D&D in
Hmm.
general, here's a question. What's the difference between your characters doing 10 points of damage to a creature with 100 hit points every turn, or doing 20 points of damage to a creature with 100 hit points every other turn? And the answer is mathematically, over the course of thousands and thousands of battles, very little.
Hmm.
But how does it change the way the game feels? What does it mean to the players who are doing these things? It means a lot, or it can mean a lot. It can be the whole soul of your game, depending on what narrative outcomes that you are looking for and how you expect game masters and players to interact with your game. Uh, any thoughts on that there, Teos?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't consider myself an expert on this kind of subject. I haven't played enough with this kind of design to have a feel for it, like inherently. And so I tend to agree with you that I want to see it and see how it plays out, because I agree with you. There are so many ways that in the end it doesn't really matter, and it's about that feel and that round around the way it plays when you're having that gameplay. Um, and I think that always hitting or always dealing damage, I think it depends. Like a game, when you take your turn and nothing happens, right? Because you failed to hit, or the creature was resistant, or maybe you didn't even get to take an action. We'll talk about that in a bit. Um, like that's a problem if you have to wait 20 minutes. It's not a problem if you're waiting 15 seconds, right? And that depends on how many people are at the table, and then all the stuff of the system, right? If everybody's taking interrupts and everybody's doing bonus actions and minor actions and whatever's, my swift action, now my familiar casts a spell, and now whatever, well, you may never go again, right? And I've played third edition adventures where my character never went. I was in a group, I was playing a ranger in a table with all wizards, and I think I rolled twice, and each time was a one in an entire 4-hour adventure, right? Because that's just the way it was. They did
Yeah.
so many things with all their things and all their actions and all their incredible spells and their summoned whatevers, and I was useless. And I was a dwarf, so I just spent my time running to the target, and it was dead before I got there. And that's just the way the game is sometimes, right? But we can build to have it be more or less of that.
It's an interesting hit means different things.
Mm-hmm.
Hit can mean rolling a die and getting over a target number, and therefore doing something as a result. Mechanically, hit narratively, you could hit something 72 times, but only once was enough to actually damage it.
Mm-hmm.
And in a D&D, in the original D&D, that's sort of the assumption. It said it right in the rules, and I should have looked it up, but I didn't. But it's something along the lines of during a round, lots of things
Mm-hmm.
happen. You move around, you swipe, you swing, you parry, but the roll summarizes what you did. So we could make a game where narratively you could be hitting a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but you never quite hit in a way that did the thing that caused a change in the in the narrative artifact that you create. So, right, all of these questions. What do hit points mean?
Yeah.
Doing hit points of damage with every attack may feel good, and maybe that's all you need in your game is for it to feel good. But if you're hitting and you're doing 10 points of damage, but every monster has 50,000 hit points, that hit doesn't mean that damage doesn't mean as much as it seems like it would.
Yeah.
Maybe it feels good, but you could work the math out so it meant absolutely nothing. And what happened when fourth edition played around with this concept, right? You had daily powers that often would be on a miss, you do a certain amount of damage, like a fireball.
Yeah.
And what happened? People complained that, well, now fighters are casting fireball essentially because they're missing, but they're still doing damage, and that's not being.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a small but vocal minority. That was enough people complaining that it became a part of the fourth edition hate zeitgeist.
But you can
and
see
now
where it
we're
comes
seeing
from.
Games come back.
You can see where it comes from, right? Because, if I upcast on my Death Cleric, I love to upcast my Inflict Wounds spell, and I'm burning some big slot. And if I hit with that puppy, it's going to be so cool. And you know what I'm really good at? Rolling very poorly when that happens. And so often I'll ask, if someone has their inspiration or whatever. I'm literally tracking all the ways that someone can give me a reroll or advantage because I know I'm going to roll so poorly on that stupid thing. But that's part of the fun tension, right? And the disappointment, this is one of the things that often is hard to do in playtesting and design and any of this, is that disappointment is actually fun. It's part of the fun. It's the downstroke of the fun cycle, right? And it can make sense to have that. And if you don't have that, you may end up with less fun because it may just feel all very meh, very blah, because it isn't emotionally going up and down as you play. Like it can be good to lose, right? Or to miss or whatever.
Right. Both mechanically and narratively.
Yeah.
There's power in failure. There is power in that. But the important part of that is making it important or being able to show the importance. If the importance is hidden in a spreadsheet somewhere, people don't understand that, right?
Yeah,
and so
I
you
like
need
that.
to be able to show it to the players.
I think you're onto that, Shawn. I think this is really the answer to this question, is that it's less about whether the exact system, but can the player tell, can the DM react to, all of the other players react to what has happened? Is it worth doing that, right? And if it is, then you're onto something that's fun, right? Because if you sort of always hit, when do I describe my monster sort of skittering away or whatever? Maybe that creates a game where I'm never describing the monster avoiding your blow or countering or whatever. It might create a very static sort of narrative, unless you have something else that can fit that. Yeah, because with misses, that's what we do as DMs, right? We say, the goblin, dodges out of your way and turns towards this other player, and okay, but it misses you, right, as its blade smashes into your shield. And that's part of the fun of how we build up the whole thing. And hopefully we keep it running fast enough because we're, got our DM skills honed.
Yeah, yeah. And this leads into our next question quite well, from the Math the Magician via the Patreon Discord. Shawn said on the Eldritch Lorecast that he could spend hours on the design considerations from the question, does the stun condition belong in the game? I would love to hear you two hold forth on that. The question, to what extent the game can truly engage between turns, is really interesting and important. And yes, yeah, the question on the Lorecast was more along the lines of, is that fun?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this stun a fun part of the game? And whenever you bring up the word fun, the answer is it depends on the people.
Yeah.
Depends on the people involved. But we can talk about action denial in the game as well. Does it have a place in a role-playing game? Well, there are arguments for yes and for no. Because it's a game and because it's a narrative construction vehicle, there are answers to that. Is action denial fun in a game? Yes and no. We just talked about making failure fun, making misses fun. You can do it, but unless you do it well, then it's obviously not being able to do something, especially if turns are long, may not be fun. So what I like to do sometimes is leave the mechanics far, far behind and jump to why people like certain things in their stories, whether it's fiction or movies or audio visual media. What does action dial look like in fiction? Why would we like it in fiction? Well, our heroes are out there, they're fighting the wizard, and all of a sudden the wizard casts paralysis or does something that the hero is frozen, can't do anything. Why is that interesting? Why is that fun? Because if it's done well, the writer or the actor can make us feel that sort of terror at there's this huge threat coming to you and you can't do anything about it.
Helpless.
And if the writer does well, we're feeling that, right? We're feeling it in our soul. Oh my gosh. I've been in situations where I felt frozen, and now this dragon is coming or this wizard is casting another spell. Or in movies or TV, right? The actor is frozen and he has this look of fear, and we're like, oh, we feel it. If that's what is fun in our entertainment, how do we make that fun in a role playing? How often has whole person been cast on a character at your table, a player character, and the DM gets around to that person, well, let's say 5 years, right? DM casts on you, you fail your save, okay, you're held. Go around the table, okay, it's your turn. How many times has the DM just said, okay, make your save, versus what's your character thinking, right? Or asking the other players, what, maybe one in every 1,000 games, a player will think to do that, or a DM will ask a player to do that, to express that. Almost never, because a lot of times, and a lot of players are just focused on the mechanics. Let's move on, do the thing. So in that sense, there's a disconnect between why it's good in our entertainment and why it's good in our game. And we have to ask ourselves, is it worth that transaction? Is it worth spending the attention capital that we have during a game to do that? And if we're playing a more narrative style game, what might we give as a reward for the player that does it? I'm going to stop because I've been talking for a while, so go.
It's fascinating. I mean, there are some things that I really love about action denial. Like, one is I loved in 4th edition that a dragon would show up and the first thing it would do is stun you to where essentially it got 2 turns. Mechanically, what's really happening is it gets 2 turns, but it would do it because of its frightful presence or whatever it was called, stunning everybody. But that action, that act of telling, you are all stunned, and it go, so you go through the initiative, it's its turn again, right? I love that. I miss that because it really did say this foe's different, this foe's special. And really it was non-painful because it's just, look, it's going to go again. That's really what it is, right? On the other hand,
Right.
4th edition would do things like with domination, where you would lose your whole turn and get to do nothing in a game that could already have things like dazing and slowing and knocking you prone and pushing you, and so it could be very easy that the amount of control out there, this was just like one step too much, that, well, you don't get to do anything because you're dominated. And we came up sometimes with house rules, like in the Dark Sun organized play campaign, using the official rules, we would always make our own version of domination for anything that would have dominated, that allowed a player to do some things on their turn, but then you were dominated on the monster's turn, it would command you, right? So that mitigated it a bit. You got to do a little bit, but it's you and actually trigger into that psychology of the idea that this thing is forcing you and you're limited in what you can do because it's got this control over you. But I think that in general, the action loss, it's hard in the way that the game, where D&D has ended up, right? Like I think of classic editions, the AD&D, the basics, you'd cast like Hold Person and it'd be like 1d4 rounds, right? And often the DM would roll behind the screen, and then at some point it would end. And even in 3rd edition, there'd be like mass suggestion or something like that. I remember one adventure we played, 4 out of 6 characters went into the other room to eat a meal at a banquet table because that's what the thing suggested they do. And so it's 2 characters left to fight this. And that was really fun. It was really thrilling. And we had a lot of humor about the, oh, how's your wine? It's delicious. How's your turkey? It's great. Like pass the, custard, would you? It can be fun.
Yeah.
But I think as the editions have progressed, the action, the math is so expected, right? It's going to be 4 rounds and you're going to do this and you're doing a quarter hit points to every monster every turn, to where when you put somebody in the penalty box, it becomes a real drain. And so some of it is the edition's fault for sort of being so on point about everything else that now these kinds of effects stick out a bit, right? And they do stick out a bit when you're completely, stunned or paralyzed or whatever. And I roll very well when I'm a DM. When I'm a player, I'm horrid. And I think one time on an online game, my dwarf rolled 13 failures in a row to try to act. Like people would keep giving me saving throws. It was 4th edition, and I would fail all of them. And it was like 13 failed saving throws in a row to do something. Yeah, that's how it goes. I'm personally okay with it, but I think a lot of people, I can see how they go, this is dumb, right? This is terrible. I'm all right with it.
And so that was a short version of a longer discussion we could have, about what games are trying to do and how they do it. Because D&D is it's the large one, but it's just one of many ways that you could handle.
So Shawn, if you had a magic wand, would you get rid of this kind of, penalty box type effects, stunning and things like that?
No, I wouldn't. What I would do is, for certain situations, allow you to buy out of at a great cost.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that does then is it gives the players a choice. Do you pay the cost? So having your action denied then becomes a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because as players, everyone's okay with losing hit, it seems.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I lose hit points. Okay, yeah. But anything else, and certain saving throws, right? Okay,
right.
But anything else seems to grate on certain players. Mm-hmm. And so, if you want to cater to those sorts of players, then you do need to do something. And one of the things is to give them a choice. Mm-hmm. And I bet 80% of players in a sort of neutral situation would be like, yeah, I'll give up 1/4 of my hit points to be able to act right now. Or, as long as it didn't take them to 0, or
Yeah. Yeah.
just because they want to be the heroes. They
And maybe you
want
could
to
do
act.
something like after the wording could be something like after the first round you can choose to blah.
Mhm. Yeah.
After a failed
Yep.
save, you can choose to blah to
And
end the effect. Yeah. Hmm.
right.
Interesting.
And I've heard people say, well, give up hit dice. Give up a hit die in order to make it safe. And that's okay, except hit dice mean different things in different
Yeah.
games, as we've
Yeah.
talked about.
That's
Right?
the
If you
problem.
have a heavy resource management game where you take several long or short rests, then giving up a hit die could be important. If every combat you run, it's just like one big combat and then a long rest, you never even use hit dice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could add a resource to the game that is that pool that you draw from, as long as there's a risk in drawing from it.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's neat. No, it's a
So,
good topic.
yeah.
It's a fun topic. And you can see, I mean, I think folks listening can see how if you were charged with handling this for a game, a variant, a new edition of D&D, good grief, right? You could spend weeks trying to think through this because it's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you could iterate 100 times, playtest 100 times, and still come out with something that half the people love and half the people hate,
Yeah.
because it's never been in the game before, and therefore it shouldn't be in. Who knows? But our last question comes from Megan J via our Patreon Discord. I have a player who always wants to do little extra flourishes during combat that the rules don't necessarily allow or account for. He's a relatively new player, and I don't think he's trying to exploit the game, just that he is imagining combat scenes like fights in a movie. How do I reward him for creativity in a way that feels meaningful without having to create my own extra rules for diving off tables, trick shots, comboing off other players' attacks, etc.? And this is a really great question. And if
Great.
you've DM'd, for a number of years for a number of different players, especially new players, you know what this is.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a great question. I have 4 points. I'll give one, and I'll let Teos talk, if he has something.
Go for it.
One is let the narrative be the narrative, but don't change anything mechanically. So if the player is a fighter with a longsword and it wants to jump off a table and attack, you can just say, great. You jump off the table and you attack. Your longsword attack includes jumping off tables and running around in circles and doing all of those cool things you do. You don't have to do anything special with the rules. You can just say, yep, that's your attack is your attack. Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because what we want when I hear this table, this is a question. I love this question because it's something that I think all DMs have to wrestle with, because we want the players to think about their environment and do things like jump off the table. But also the rules don't give you any benefit for jumping off a table. And there is the danger at the far end of the spectrum where the player would say, cool, you bring a table. I'll always jump off of it because that benefit's so good.
Exactly.
In an organized play, there would be a group that would do that, right? Oh, I carry their table, or I took the leadership feat so someone could bring a table that I can jump off of every time, right? Literally, that's what someone would do, right? And that may not be your players. You're lucky, but there is a little bit of that will last time. And so you want to somewhere between not creating and there's that whole rulings not rules. You don't want to create a lasting rule that becomes an exploit that suddenly the game is, the characters are more powerful. That is not the point. And sometimes you can literally have that conversation with your players and say, look, when I say a thing, acting off of responding to something like this, I am not establishing some fact that forever you can exploit. Like I'm not. I'm trying to work off of it. You can just break meta and say or break immersion and go to the meta and say, look, I'm not. I'm just giving you a thing. I will do something different next time. So they know I can't just count on exploiting things. I can't unlock a thing, right? But then on the other
Right.
side of it is you don't want to have it be so nothing. And my worry about just the number one you mentioned is that they go, well, what's the point if I describe what I do? Who cares? And so you do at least want to. And one thing that I'll do when I'm going to do nothing, like you described, is I'll have the monsters respond to it in a way that leaves the possibility that something's there, right? Like the ogre seems surprised by your brave move. And then nothing really mechanical is being revealed. But I believe that possibility that maybe something could happen, right? Because you've impressed the ogre. What does that mean? We don't know yet. And you know, some kind of something. Give them a little something with it,
Right.
even if you don't give something mechanical.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean these 1 through 4 things to be the only thing you do.
Yeah.
My first step is if someone describes something really wacky, is just to say, yes, you do that. No, there's no mechanical benefits, disadvantages. You know, you're up on the balcony and you want to jump down onto someone. You use your move to jump down, and then you attack. It's great description. Please keep doing that. In this case, it's just part of the attack.
Yeah.
And that's right. That's my first thing in my.
All right, I want to hear your second.
The second thing in my line is, at some point, you're going to have a hard conversation with, especially new players, who want to constantly do things that are spells, but they're not a spellcaster. That are 17th level subclass abilities for certain classes that they want. And you're just going to have to say, listen, what you are trying to do is covered by the rules, and your character can't do it right. If you want to be able to do that, here's the way to get that access to your character for that. But I can't allow you constantly to do this thing that, and it goes back to what you said, right? Otherwise, you're all carrying tables around and jumping up.
Ball bearings.
So those are the first two things, right? It's sure you can do it, and it's totally normal part of your attack rate. No, you really can't do that for these various reasons. Now we're going to get to that in-between part where it cannot be part of your normal attack. But I think it's something that we should allow. So advantage and disadvantage are powerful tools. Giving choices for extra risks, for extra reward, is a great balancing factor. If a player tries to do something that's in that gray area, to say, hey, listen, you can totally try that. You're going to have disadvantage on your attack. But if you hit, I will say it's a critical. Or if you hit, I will say it knocks the. And you're giving that choice. Now you're making it a game, but not only are you making it a game, you're making it a game where there are narrative, fun, impactful, visual, heroic, cinematic, dare I say, elements to the game.
Yeah, 100%. And that's I think the best way to do that as you get comfortable improvising a bit as a DM is to think of it as a positive and a negative, right? That at the end of it, the game should be balanced. So if they're going to do something cool and you're going to give them a reward, there probably should be some downside that's possible for it. So an easy one would be that jumping on the table would be, the table's full of stuff. There's a chance you could slip and fall. Make me an acrobatics check, right? And now you know, it's going to be really, and what I often say, because when I say to them, make me an acrobatics check, I'll say something like, but it would be really cool if you succeed. Because I want people doing these kinds of things. I want you like toppling the pillar onto the monster instead of just attacking again. I want creative play. But it can't be that it's all exploits. It's not all, milk and honey. You've got to do some so there's downsides, there's risk, right? And that's the kind of thing. And I mean, one thing I love, right? Jumping on the back of a monster. If you want to make me happy as a DM, just if it's a large creature and you want to jump onto the back, I love that. I think it's so cool. And you're probably expending movement and risk and whatever. And when that happens, I often think to myself, what happens in movies? Well, the monster will try to bash against the pillar, or they'll try to shake you off and send you flying. And now we start improvising with those things. And that's a lot of fun, right? I do like that kind of play. And so you're
Yep.
just wanting to find that, like, I'm going to give you a
Yep.
positive, but there's a chance of a negative, and it can play out over time. I
Yep.
shared on the Discord. I was recently watching the Acquisitions Incorporated season 2, and in one of the episodes, Jim Dark Magic has a chance to cast a spell when 2 of his companions are inside a gelatinous cube. And they're pretty low level. They've gone down in level through time travel thing. And so there's this, it's kind of serious. Like, uh-oh. And
Mhm.
in vintage Microhulic, the spell he casts is Prestidigitation. To make a section of the cube near Bobby Zimmerowski, who likes cheese, a section of the cube is flavored like cheese. And you can just see Jeremy Crawford's head just go like, trying to think on the fly, on camera, what do I do with
Right.
that? So the first thing he does is he gives Jim Dark Magic's player, Mike Rulik, inspiration, right? Which actually doesn't help in this situation whatsoever, because Bobby the Barbarian is already raging inside the gelatinous cube. So advantage won't help. You can't just give that inspiration on. But it's just a way of saying, good job doing something wacky, right? And then over the next series of actions that characters take, Jeremy goes on to give minor little benefits because of this cheese thing. Because the idea is Bobby's just sitting there suddenly eating the gelatinous cube. And there's great fun at the table, right? Like Bobby decides he's not actually swallowing it because he does know this is an acidic gelatinous cube. So he's spitting it to the side. But all of it leads to the fact that by the time we get to Bobby's turn, Bobby is half out of the gelatinous cube and takes half damage, which means he lives, right? And that's that's the idea, right? That if you say, what was the benefit of prestidigitation? You need all these sentences to describe it because it's complicated and could have gone either way. Was Jim Dark Magic doing a dumb move? No, because this is a fun table, right? Was he exploiting things? No, not that either, right? And that's where you want to try to get your players and the DM to be in that.
Yep. Yeah, and the last point I had was exactly what you said. Ability checks are your friends, right? And so make that DC 10 acrobatics check to be able to get up, off, and then off the table. And if you fail, something bad's going to happen, and if you succeed, something good's going to happen. And that goes back to giving that risk versus reward. So, and it's never. You can just go back to the base game and figure things from there, right? If a fighter attacks for 1d8 plus 4 on every turn, then make something else that someone tries that's similar, a similar check. Instead of attacking against AC, you are making an Arcana check, wizard, to be able to do something funky with your Firebolt. Right, make an Arcana check. If you succeed, you do either the normal damage or you do a D8 plus 4, because that's what the fighter would have done if it had hit on their
love
turn.
it.
So, fall back to what you know.
Right.
And go from there. Great question, Megan J. Thank you. And thank you to all the people who have written in via social media, via our Patreon, via the Discord that we keep for our patrons. We will continue to answer those questions into 2024. But now let's get to our news. There is a bit of news which we will cover as quickly as we possibly can, because we have heard from ITV2 about mixed RPG sales. Teos, take us through this.
Yeah, it's a very vague thing, and it's locked behind a paywall. I somehow was able to see it once, and then the article disappeared. So a little bit is going off memory, but essentially some of their reports where they do for their kind of behind their paywall from gaming stores suggested that sales were mixed, with more, this is in 2023, with more declines than increases on their RPG sales. So I sold less last year than before. Then some saying more, but overall it was like it had slowed a bit. ICV2 is often really wrong, so I just mentioned this as a sort of, just put a pin in it, think about it. It's a little data point. It's very soft. It's not hard facts, whatever. But maybe things were a bit slower last year compared to the year before. We'll find out. It's all post-pandemic. A lot of things going on. The economy. I wouldn't make a big deal out of it, but just it's an interesting note.
Next, we have a Update on Winter Fantasy. This is one of those if you know things. Winter Fantasy is a cool convention, both in terms of temperature and what goes on there. It's running February 7th through 11th. It is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You can sign up now as of last Wednesday. The signups were live, so you can buy a badge by events. This year they have Baldman Games, who runs the convention, is running Dragonlance Adventures, Moonshay Isle Adventures, the Dreams of the Red Wizard campaign, and some Planescape adventures, including the Planescape Epic. There's also other games from Free League. We have Esper Genesis, some Modiphius games, and some Ghostfire gaming adventures. You can still sign up for many of those events now. And there's a link in the show notes, but it's via Tabletop Events, if you're familiar with that site. Great convention, very small, very intimate, quite cheap, both in terms of paying to play and the surrounding hotels and food options. And it's just a great place to hang out and play some games.
I'm excited because
Next, we have
I got a seat at a table of Mothership, which people on our Discord are often talking about. So I'll get to try that out. Really excited. And then I'm playing with some Mon Sherwin. I don't know if I got the name right. Running an Aurora game for Ghostfire.
Yeah.
I'm playing Esper Genesis. I'm running the Epic,
Yeah.
and I'm running a bunch of Moonshays. So if you're playing the level 11 up Moonshay stuff, you might have me in your DM pool, and I look forward to seeing you say hi. Remind me of your name. What are you running, Shawn?
I signed up for one slot. I am running 2 Aurora adventures, the same thing that I ran at Origins, and pre-generated characters introducing folks to the new rules and the setting of Aurora.
Nice.
Doing that a couple times, and then playing. My group from home. I'm bringing, or they're bringing me one way or the other. But so I'll be there playing with them, and then I've also gone off and doing some other games, including one of the slots that you're running to see if I can actually get in a game where you're DMing.
Sweet.
Tell me about Shannon Appleklein's 2023 review.
Yeah, Shannon's a fantastic historian. He's written great books looking at the history of the industry, and he always has a year-end review. It's now on his own blog website, designers-and-dragons.com. Link in our show notes. And he reviews 2023, and he always has a really nice zoom out, zoom in capability. He'll cover things that folks forget. So, and he starts with the notable artists and designers who passed away last year, which is always good because I don't know all of them. He has such a breadth of what he sees. It's really nice to look over all those names and think about that. Even though it's sad, it's nice to recognize it, right, and think through their contributions and how much that mattered. He, of course, discusses all of Wizards of the Coast's successes, the movie, Baldur's Gate 3, the postage stamps, and then the missteps, and how Wizards is always the center of industry attention for all those obvious reasons. He highlights the successes of Free League, Matt Forbeck's Marvel Universe role-playing game, Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, and others. Goes into the top crowdfunders, noting that 9 RPGs topping $1 million is similar to previous years and tended to be 5e or 5e variants. He notes that BackerKit seems to be emerging as a contender to Kickstarter, and he discusses the reaction fans have had to things like AI art from a variety of companies, the growth of OSR style and variant 5e RPGs. It's all a really good read. I at times have, things that I might, pick a thing here, but that's true of everything, and I feel most people should feel that way about anything I write. So it's fun. It's thought-provoking. It's a great write-up. I love it.
We also heard from Ben Riggs, who we interviewed on the show about a year ago for his book Slaying the Dragon. And he posted some thoughts on various social media platforms where he declared, quote, "The golden age of TTRPGs is dead." And his analysis gained quite fervent and quite rapid response, especially from industry professionals who often keep their mouths quiet about these things. So if you go to facebook.com and look at ben.riggs.rights, you can get that, but it's also on other
It's on the
places
in
that are
world too. So
database.
Mike Shea had a hilarious thing
Yeah.
about you could go to Facebook, but then you have to wash afterwards. That was really
Mhm.
funny. So yeah, it is on the in world, the
Yeah.
full thing there.
Yeah. And so I just want to say a couple of things about
Yeah.
this. Writing history is hard.
Mm.
Hindsight, despite popular idioms, is about 2040
Yeah.
at best. You still have people, you know, arguing about the fall of the golden age of Rome, of Greece, of China, of various golden ages. Um, but when you write history, you have to do more than quote facts. You need to write with precision and with a wisdom that comes from experience and a little bit of humility to realize that you might be wrong. And details matter. And I'm saying all of these things in response to this because in some cases along the way here, there was a misstep in a number of these categories. So just like the very first quote was, "We are watching a bright and special time in the TTRPG industry pass away before our eyes," and I'm like, we're always doing that, right? We're always watching things come and go, and we're watching greatness rise, and then right opportunities squandered, and all of those things. So it's sort of a vague uh, statement. Uh, I think if you're past like 25 years old, you've already experienced right something great falling, and it's just the
Yeah.
way things work. And then it says around the start of the 2010s, we saw the dawn of a new golden age of tabletop role playing games. Since then, huge numbers of players have found the hobby since thanks to Stranger Things and actual plays like Critical Role. And these fans discovered a vibrant and thrumming TTRPG industry. And I'm like, maybe? Can you give me any sort of facts to back this up? Because Stranger Things was released in 2016, which was not the start of the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
Critical Role the web series began in March of 2015. That's halfway through the 2010s. Um, and by that time, was the industry vibrant and thrumming? Well, 5 years might have been, but I don't know. And that statement sort of seems to imply that 5E wouldn't have was already popular, but wouldn't have been as popular without Critical Role and Stranger Things. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
There
I'll
was a
say it.
D20. Oh, go ahead.
I mean,
Mhm.
I love everybody to some extent, or almost everybody. And I really appreciate what Ben wrote in his book. But Ben, do better. Like
Mhm.
if you're going to be a historian, right? A person who goes through and collates facts and pores over sources and talks to people and interviews them and everything. Great. Don't suddenly abandon all of that for this sort of lazy writing. And that's what this is. Because the truth is, the industry is so complicated that if you just go to make one statement, it's probably going to be wrong unless you think through it really carefully. And he has not thought through the things he said carefully. I can't believe he has because of the things you're pointing out. And there are multiple versions of these kinds of weird mistakes where he hasn't done his homework, and he's a historian, And I can understand that a historian may want to be part of the, I don't know, the discussion or whatever. Like, you don't want to be in the background like historians usually are. You maybe want to be in the foreground. I mean, we just finished talking about Shannon's review, right? But Shannon and John Peterson have a knack for treating their everyday conversations with the same care that they take for their historical writings. And that has not been done here. And I think that's the core behind all this is it's sloppy. And I hate to say that. I want to say nothing but positive things about people. And again, I appreciate the book he wrote, but this is sloppy, undocumented, unsupported, weak sauce. What else can I say, Shawn? You take it.
No, no. You said it more bluntly than I would be willing to.
Apologies to everybody.
But yeah, well, it details matter, right?
Yeah.
Knowing when the fifth edition SRD was released under the OGL is important, right? Because the OGL, the SRD wasn't released until January of 2016.
For 5e, yeah.
So to say that there was a thriving, or for 5e, so to say that there was already a thriving TTRPG industry needs to be proven.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a given.
Yeah.
And then just to say golden age, what does that mean? Is a golden age how much money it makes? Because that's where some of us are, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want the golden age to be this era where people make not just great games, but make livings doing these things. Or is a golden age just the vast number of games? And I don't even disagree with some of Ben's conclusions. But just the process of getting to those conclusions
Yeah.
Is either unclear or just flat wrong.
Yeah.
Based on facts that are not provided or are incorrect if they
Yeah.
are. So, those things need to be worked out. And it spawned a good conversation. And
Yeah, it's not often
part
you
of the
see.
reason it spawned such a good conversation
I mean, this
was
many
because
people.
it was not a well presented argument.
Yeah, it's very seldom that you hear people weren't fighting each other because everybody was essentially going, "Yeah, this is so wrong, and it's wrong in this way," and then someone, "Well, it's also wrong in this way." Just
Right. That was the thing. It brought everyone together. People who are diametrically opposed about lots of things were like, this is really terrible.
That was
And,
Ben's secret
like,
cunning
yeah,
plan.
yeah.
He wrote a piece very cleverly, masterfully to bring the industry together. Well done, Ben.
Mhm.
No, I mean,
And so, we'll keep an eye on this. We'll keep an eye on how things change, but you never know that you're in a golden age until 100 years later, and you never know when that age has ended, ever.
No, you don't. I've got so this topic came up first. I saw it through our Patreon Discord, and we talked about it a little there, and I talked about it with you and with other folks that are friends of ours in the industry, and I actually, it's all Ben Burns, not Ben Riggs, but Ben Burns' fault, who's on the Lorecast podcast with you, because he said nice things about our show, which thank you. That means a lot to me coming from the #1 podcast. No, but really, the Lorecast is awesome, and I love watching it. And it was very touching to hear him say nice things, and so it made me want to write a blog post, for better or worse, around this. So that'll come out probably around the time this airs. And one of the things that I looked at is these questions you brought up about what does it mean to be in a golden age, and how do you even know you're in one? And I'll just share this a little bit, and I've said this before on the show, but when I started playing D&D in 1983, it was so clear to me, 100% clear, that D&D was on the rise. It was everywhere. There were, Big Wheels toys, there were birthday plates, there were, you name it, cartoon, everything. And I felt that way for a decade. And yet, the year that I started playing was the first year of losing profit and losing revenue for TSR. And it was that way for years, right? I started after the peak of D&D, and I couldn't see it. To me, it was the golden era, right? It took us decades to figure out what the golden era actually was or wasn't from the perspective of revenue, and how it led to this ruinous decline and sale to wizards and everything. And so things are very, what is a golden era? The other thing is, if we decrease from a golden era, if the golden era stops, what does it look like when we end up? Is it as horrible as during 4th edition? I had a lot of fun during 4th edition, and a lot of really great games like Numenera were made. I don't, is it as bad as the years when Apocalypse World was created? Is it as bad as 3rd edition? I wouldn't really describe those as bad. There were things that were good and bad about those eras, but they were really good, right? And so I don't know. And the thing is, the industry has changed in so many ways with Kickstarter and other things that going away from a golden era, it's not like we have bombed ourselves to the Stone Age, right? Where we'll drop to will be pretty darn good. And that's not to say that it doesn't matter that 5e is strong or whatever, but I just, the doom with which this piece was written to me was a really bizarre perspective for a historian to take. I'll leave it at that.
We will leave it at that and get to our creator and crowdfunding news. Starting with Bianca Bickford's new 5e adventure, The Forged Dragons, on the DM's Guild. Bianca's done work for me at Ghostfire. She's the senior project marketing manager for Roll20, and this adventure takes place in Icewind Dale before the events of Run Frostmaiden. In this adventure, the characters are hired by Waterdeep authorities to track down counterfeiters, and they have to go to Icewind Dale to do so. A fun little adventure, maps by Brian Patterson, and worked on with great love by Bianca. And so you can check it out right now on the DM's Guild. And we'll switch over real quick to Jeff Stevens, who has released Weapons of Legend for 5e. This supplement for 5e contains 83 magic weapons. 43 have progression rules that allow a character to acquire the weapon and have it progress in power as they complete tasks, finish quests, and gain experience. Each of these items also has a legend behind them. And Teos, what did you design for Jeff?
I've had a couple people say, "Is that Flump Whip yours?" And yes, indeed. I was asked, it was all Jeff's fault. Jeff asked me to create a Flump Whip, and then I did indeed do my darndest with that Flump Whip. I love it a lot. I can't wait to put it in a game. This is a really fun book. I love it. I also have started looking at Bianca Bickford's book. I recommend both of these. I think they're really cool. I love the dwarfiness of Bianca's work. I love the progression of the magic item book. So both of these, links in their show notes, but you can just find them on the DM's Guild or Drive Through, and I would highly recommend checking them out.
Yep. Now tell me about the Goodbye Dungeon 23, Hello Lore 24.
Yeah, so folks might remember, especially if you're on Mastodon, that there was this hashtag Dungeon 23 last year where it was like every day of the year design a room in a dungeon, and not everybody went through. Though some folks like Richard Green and Mike Shea, they did it, and Richard shared his every single day. So the new one is Lore 24, and this challenge is by Yora, is the idea that you come up with a general concept for a new campaign setting, or take any setting you've already done some work on and you want to expand upon, and every day write up a little something that fits into that world, right? A little bit of lore, a place, a creature, a spell, whatever. And there are some very clever things that are already out there with that hashtag Lore24. And the whole idea is to, get your creative muscles flowing every day, write a little something and do it. I'm not personally doing this, but it does, even just reading the entries makes me think about, if I were to create a campaign world, this is what it would look like. And just, I enjoy these kinds of things a lot. And thank you to everybody who's sharing them and posting them.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great exercise if you ever thought I could do RPG design for a living. Just do this and then multiply it by 10, and you will have what it's like to be an RPG designer. We have Lamordia, the God Engine, from friend of the show Megan J, whose question we answered earlier, who's had great success with the DM's Guild release Shadow of the Black Rose. Now has an adventure out levels 1 to 3. It is a 1 to 2 session Ravenloft adventure set in what Megan calls the land of snow and stitched flesh, where the unrestrained ambitions of doctors, scientists, and capitalists provide fertile ground for the machinations of the Dark Tower. It is centered on locating a missing scientist in order to stop a psychic entity from spreading virus style across the domains of Ravenloft. It includes 6 original maps with Roll20 and Foundry versions, 5 pre-generated characters, and 3 new monsters available right now on the DM's Guild. And last but not least, to MCDM, we tip our hats to you for your $4.6 million funding for your new RPG. This is the 3rd highest RPG crowdfunder ever, and we will take it as fantastic news for our entire hobby. So good job, MCDM, and all the folks there. We are looking forward to the final product and talking about this game as we talk about other games in relation to D&D.